$91,000 gone. Not stolen by a stranger. Not taken by someone who broke a window in the night. Taken up by the two people who knew exactly which room I was sleeping in, exactly how deep I would sleep, and exactly how long they had before I woke up. My own parents used my fingerprint while I was unconscious to drain every single dollar I had saved for 7 years. And when I came downstairs the next morning, my father looked me straight in the eyes, poured me a coffee, and smiled. He smiled. Here is what nobody tells you about betrayal. The part that breaks you is never the money. It is the moment you realize the warmth was never real. The dinners, the hugs that were so proud of you, every single bit of it was just them keeping you close enough to take from. But here is what they did not count on. I did not say a single word at that breakfast table. I smiled back. I finished my coffee. I drove 3 blocks away, and I built the case that would end them. Stay with me. Because what happened next, they never saw coming. And neither will you. Some people will smile at you over dinner, pour you a drink, ask about your dreams, and the whole time underneath that warmth, they're already calculating exactly how much of your life they could take before you notice. I know that feeling now. I know it the way you know a scar, not because you see it every day, but because it never fully stops hurting. My name is Jake. I am 30 years old. I live in Chicago. And the morning I woke up to find $91,000 missing from my account, the only people in the house were the ones who raised me. Before I tell you what happened the night everything changed, I need to go back. Because this story didn't start with a bank transfer. It started with a piggy bank shaped like a baseball when I was 8 years old and my father's hand reaching into it without asking. He called it borrowing. He always called it borrowing. That word became the architecture of my entire childhood. Every missing dollar, every emptied envelope, every birthday card with cash that somehow evaporated before I could hold it was just borrowing. My mother covered every crack with the same plaster. Your dad is under so much pressure right now. He's going to turn it around. You know how much he loves you. And I believed her. For years, I believed her the way only a child believes the person who tucks them in at night. By the time I was 16, I had learned to hide money. Not in my wallet. Not in a drawer. Under a loose baseboard behind my bedroom closet, wrapped in 2 plastic bags. $40 here. $60 there. Small enough that no one would notice it growing. Important enough that I checked it every single night before I slept. The week I turned 18, I counted every dollar I had saved. $412. I put it in my backpack, zipped every pocket, walked downstairs, and told my parents I was leaving for college orientation early. My mother hugged me too long. My father shook my hand and said, "You're going to do great things, Jake." He said it with a sincerity that made my chest ache. I didn't look back when I walked out that door. What I didn't know, what I had absolutely no way of knowing, was that 12 years later, I would walk right back in. And that second time, they were ready for me. The 12 years between leaving and going back were mine in a way nothing before them had been. I waited tables in Wicker Park for 2 years while I finished my degree nights and weekends. I slept on a mattress on the floor of a studio apartment with a radiator that clicked like a broken clock. I learned how to be cold in November and still show up. I learned that tiredness is not a reason to stop. By 25, I was an account manager at a mid-sized logistics firm on the North Side. Not glamorous. Not the kind of job people brag about at parties. But the kind that paid on time, every time, and gave me something I had never had growing up. Predictability. Every bonus, every tax return, every extra shift covered went into one account. A single account I never touched. Never told anyone about. It was not a secret kept in fear. It was a boundary built in silence. $91,000 over 7 years. That number represented every missed vacation, every skipped concert, every Friday night I stayed in while my friends went out. It was a studio I wanted to open, a workspace where my name would be on the door and no one could reach through the window and take what was inside. The call came on a Thursday in April. My mother's voice, soft and careful. "Jake, honey, we haven't seen you in so long. Your father had a health scare. Nothing serious, we think. But we'd love for you to come home, just for the weekend. The family is gathering." I almost said no. The version of me that had learned every lesson the hard way almost said no. But the version of me that still remembered the smell of my mother's kitchen, that still hoped on some level that people could change, that version said yes. I drove to Rockford on a Saturday morning. The house hit me before I was even out of the car. New siding, a remodeled front porch, landscaping that hadn't been there 5 years ago. Clean, deliberate, expensive in all the ways it was trying to be seen. I stood in the driveway for a moment too long doing the math. These were not the improvements of people who were drowning. These were the improvements of people who had found water somewhere. Inside, the house smelled like a candle trying to be a home. Cousins I barely recognized filled the living room. My Uncle Ray talked loudly about a boat he'd rented last summer. My cousin Tess showed off a new camera she said was for content creation. My mother moved through the crowd, touching shoulders, laughing at the right moments, steering the room the way she always had. My father found me near the kitchen. His grip was firm when he shook my hand. "Jake, you look good, son." He said son the way some people say it, not as warmth, but as a designation, a category he needed me in. Dinner was long. The table was full. The wine appeared before I asked for it. My mother refilled my glass twice before I noticed the first pour was still half full. The conversation stayed on me like a spotlight. My job, my apartment, my plans, my savings, how close I was to making a move. By 9 o'clock, my eyelids felt weighted. I told myself it was the drive. I told myself it was the wine. I went to the guest room, set my bag against the wall, and was asleep within minutes. I woke at 4:17 a.m. to my phone vibrating on the nightstand. A bank notification. I picked it up thinking it was a routine alert. Balance update. Maybe a scheduled transfer I had forgotten about. My eyes adjusted to the screen in the dark. The number I saw did not belong to my account. $91,240 gone. Transferred between 1 a.m. and 3:45 a.m. Not in one movement. In 11 separate transactions, each one just under the threshold that triggers an automatic fraud flag. 11 transfers, each authorized with my biometric data from a device logged at this address. I sat up so fast the room spun. For a full minute, I did not move. I just stared at the screen and let the numbers reconfigure themselves, waiting for them to make a different kind of sense. They didn't. I opened the full transaction log. Each line had a timestamp, device ID, a geolocation marker. Every single one pointed to the house I was sitting in right now. Used from my own phone. Authorized with my own fingerprint. While I was unconscious, something cold moved through me that had nothing to do with the temperature. I set the phone face down on the mattress and pressed both palms flat against the sheets until I could feel my own pulse in my hands. They had done it again. Not a $20 bill from a birthday card. Not a skateboard sold to a pawn shop. $91,000. Every single dollar I had spent 7 years building. And downstairs, in a house full of new paint and recessed lighting, they were still sleeping. I did not go downstairs. I did not wake anyone. I did not make a sound that the walls could carry. I opened my notes app and typed every detail I could feel slipping away from me. The exact bitterness at the back of my throat when I drank that wine, the way my mother's hand had hovered near my glass, the angle of the refill I hadn't asked for, the weight of my phone when I picked it up, the way my bag was not exactly where I had set it against the wall. Then I photographed everything I could document quietly. The room, my bag, the position of my belongings, the window, the lock on the door. Small, steady passes, no flash. I airdropped every transaction screenshot to my laptop and backed them up to an external hard drive I kept in the inner zip pocket of my backpack for reasons I had never been able to fully explain until now. At 5:30 a.m., I called my friend Marcus. He had a law degree he used for compliance work. He answered on the third ring. I told him the numbers. There was a silence on his end that felt like a held breath. "Don't say anything to them yet," he said. "Don't react. Don't let them see your face change. Get out of the house naturally and call me from your car." Then he added something that tightened every muscle in my body. "Jake, this is not the first time someone has done this to a family member. The setup you're describing, the gathering, the wine, the timing, the amounts just under fraud thresholds, this was not panic. This was a plan." I hung up and sat in the silence of that guest room as the first light came through the curtains and understood something that rewired everything I thought I knew about my own history. This had never been carelessness. It had never been desperation. Every single thing they had ever taken from me had been deliberate. I came downstairs at 7 like nothing had shifted inside me. My mother was at the stove. My father sat at the kitchen table with a coffee mug and the ease of a man who had slept clean. "Morning, Jake." My father smiled. "You sleep okay?" "Like a rock," I said. "I ate breakfast." I kept my voice level and my eyes soft. I talked about Chicago traffic and a project at work and whether it might rain on the drive back. My mother laughed at something my father said. My father refilled my coffee without asking. The whole time, the transaction log was open on my phone in my jacket pocket. When I stood to leave, my mother hugged me. "Come back soon, okay? Don't make it so long next time." I told her I would. I held the hug 1 second longer than usual because I needed to know if I could feel anything in it that was real. I couldn't. I drove exactly 3 blocks, pulled to the curb, and called Marcus back. He had already been on the phone with a fraud attorney named Sloan. She had taken 2 cases like mine in the last 18 months. She told Marcus to have me call her before the bank opened. I called her from the car, engine running, heat on, the neighborhood outside gray and still. She walked me through what to pull and how to preserve the metadata so no defense attorney could challenge the chain of custody. She told me to contact the bank's fraud division directly, not through the app, and to request a formal hold on the outbound transfers pending investigation. Then she said something I was not ready for. "I need you to check one more thing. Did you ever give your parents access to a family account, a shared login, or a location sharing service? Any app that might have been connected to your device?" I thought about it, and then my stomach dropped. 3 years ago, when my mother had minor surgery, I had linked a shared location app to my phone so she could see I was close when I drove down. I never deleted it. I never even thought about it again. They had known where I was every time I came back. They had tracked every visit. They had watched the pattern of when I arrived, how long I stayed, which room I slept in. They had not gotten lucky with the timing. They had studied it. I called the bank's fraud line from the curb and stayed on hold for 22 minutes with my hazard lights on. When the specialist came on, I walked through every line of the log with the precision Sloan had given me. The specialist's tone shifted somewhere around transfer number 4. She escalated the call without me asking. By noon, a formal fraud investigation was open. The outgoing funds were flagged and partially intercepted, not all of it, but enough to matter. Sloan filed a preliminary report with the Rockford Sheriff's Office that afternoon. At 4 p.m., a message from my mother lit my screen. "Jake, I don't know what you think happened, but please call us before you do something that hurts this family. We can explain everything." I read it twice. I noted that she had not said nothing happened. She had not said you were wrong. She had said we can explain, which meant she already knew I knew, which meant my father had found something when he checked his own end of the plan and saw the fraud flags. I screenshot the message, time-stamped it, and sent it to Sloan without a reply. 3 days later, I sat in Sloane's office in a building downtown that smelled like printer paper and cold air. She laid the evidence across the conference table in clean rows. Bank logs, geolocation data, biometric records, device IDs, the partial intercept confirmations, and my mother's text message printed and labeled. "They're going to say it was a gift," she said. That is the first move, almost always. A son helping his parents. The burden of proof then shifts. That is why the metadata matters. That is why the timestamps matter. That is why we preserved everything before they had time to build a story around it. She was right. Their attorney filed a response within the week. A gift freely given between a son and his parents. A private family matter that law enforcement had no standing to interfere in. My father gave a statement to investigators that made my blood run cold. Jake has always supported us. He authorized these transfers himself before the reunion. He's been under stress and may have forgotten. He said it with the practiced gravity of a man who had been constructing stories his whole life and never once been caught. That same week, my cousin Tess posted on social media. Some people weaponize their family against them for attention and money. Not everything is a crime. Respect your parents. The comments section filled with people who had known me since I was a child, people who had eaten at the same table as me, standing in a line of disapproval without asking a single question. I read every comment. I did not respond to one. Marcus drove up from Chicago and sat with me in my apartment while I processed what it meant to be publicly branded a liar by the people who had built that particular version of me. "You know what you have," he said. "Let it speak." The investigator's full report came back with something Sloane had hoped for but not guaranteed. My parents had done this before. Not to me. To my father's younger brother, my Uncle Dean, who lived in Phoenix and had cut off contact with the family 8 years ago. At the time, no one told me why. My parents said Dean was unstable, difficult. They accused them of things that weren't true. I had believed that too. The investigator had found a civil case from 8 years ago. My uncle had filed and then quietly withdrawn his complaint after what court documents described as a mediated family resolution. Translation, they had pressured him into silence, and he had taken a smaller amount back just to make it stop. When Sloane showed me the file, I sat with it for a long moment. Then I picked up my phone and found a number I had not dialed in almost a decade. Dean answered on the second ring. When I told him who I was, he went very quiet. And then he said, "I wondered if this day would ever come." He drove to Chicago the following week. He sat across from me in a diner on Belmont with both hands around a coffee mug, his face older than I remembered but steady. He told me everything. The same pattern. The same timing. The same story about a gift. And the same silence that followed when the family closed ranks and he found himself alone on the wrong side of a wall built from blood. "I should have fought harder," he said. "I let them scare me into stopping." You don't stop, Jake. You don't stop for anything. We filed the amended complaint together. Dean submitted a sworn statement that documented the previous incident in enough detail that the pattern was undeniable. 2 incidents, same method, same family, years apart. That shifted the case from a civil dispute to evidence of a coordinated scheme. The day of the formal hearing, I wore the same jacket I had driven home to Rockford in. I sat beside Sloane at the petitioner's table and watched my parents enter with their attorney. My father's jaw was set in the way I remembered from childhood. Hard and certain, the expression of a man who had never fully believed he could lose. My mother looked at me once, not with guilt, not with apology, with the particular cold calculation of someone deciding whether the performance of grief would still be useful. I held her gaze. I did not look away. When the evidence was presented, transfer logs and biometric data and geolocation records, the courtroom shifted the way a room shifts when the air changes. Their attorney raised his voice twice. The judge asked him to lower it both times. When Dean took the stand and spoke about what happened 8 years ago, My father's hand moved to the table in front of him and pressed flat against the surface, the only visible crack in the composure he had spent his whole life polishing. Then I spoke. I did not authorize these transfers. I was unconscious in a guest room of their house where my fingerprint was used 11 times over the course of 2.5 hours to drain an account I spent 7 years building. I have the data. I have the timestamps. I have a prior incident documented by another family member who was silenced once before. I am not here to punish anyone. I am here because the truth is the only thing they cannot restructure with a better story. The room was quiet when I sat back down. The judge reviewed the exhibits for 4 minutes without speaking. The verdict did not come the same day. These things rarely do. But when it came clean. Financial fraud, identity theft, unauthorized biometric access. The funds were ordered returned, 87,000 to the 91 recovered. 3 years probation. Mandatory restitution structured over 18 months under court supervision. My father did not explode. He sat very still while the sentence was read the way something collapses when all the load-bearing walls come down at once, quietly, from the inside. My mother cried. Whether it was grief or strategy, I no longer had the energy to determine. Outside the courthouse, the wind off Lake Michigan was sharp and steady. Marcus put a hand on my shoulder. Sloan said something about next filings. Dean stood beside me on the steps, and neither of us said anything for a long moment. Then he said, "I'm sorry I didn't do this years ago." "You weren't ready," I said. I wasn't either until I was. There was no celebration that night. No dinner out, no bottle opened. I went home to my apartment, sat on the floor with my back against the couch, and let the silence have the room for a while. What I felt was not triumph. It was not even relief. It was the specific exhaustion of a person who has been braced for impact for so long that when the threat finally passes, the body does not know how to let go of the tension it has been carrying. I thought about being 8 years old and hearing my father's hands on a ceramic bank. I thought about 16 and checking a loose baseboard every night before sleep. I thought about 7 years of Friday nights at home while the count number on a screen climbed slowly, dollar by dollar, towards something I believed would finally be mine. None of that time comes back. That is the part no judgment and no restitution fully addresses. What was taken was not only money, it was years. And years are the one thing no court can return. But here is what I want to leave you with tonight. 6 months after that hearing, I signed a lease on a small studio space in Logan Square. White walls, big windows, my name on the glass door in clean black letters. The first morning I unlocked it alone, I stood in the center of the empty floor and did not move for a long time. It was not what I had imagined. It was smaller. It needed work. The heat came on too strong, and the floor had a creak near the back wall. But it was mine in the way that nothing given to me had ever been mine, because every single thing inside it had been earned by me, protected by me, and fought for by me. Marcus invested in the first year of operating costs. A formal contract with clear terms, buyback clauses, and reporting requirements that we both agreed to and both signed. Not because we didn't trust each other. Because we respected each other enough to protect what we were building together. Dean and I talked every few weeks. He had built a life in Phoenix that was quieter than mine but steadier. He had a daughter who was 9 years old and had never met my parents. He was not bitter about that. He was deliberate about it, which is a different thing entirely. I joined a support group for adults who had experienced financial abuse within their families. The first night I spoke, I told the room what I had told the courtroom. The data, the timestamps, the biometric records. When I was done, a man in his 50s raised his hand and said, "I've been trying to explain to my own kids for 3 years that what my parents did was not normal." Hearing someone name it the way you just named it means something. That sentence stayed with me longer than the verdict did. I want to say something directly to anyone who is listening to this and recognizing pieces of their own story in mine. The people who take from you are counting on one thing above all else. They are counting on your love being stronger than your self-preservation. They are counting on you deciding again and again that protecting the idea of family is worth more than protecting yourself. It isn't. Family is not a category that exempts anyone from accountability. The fact that someone raised you does not give them permanent access to everything you build. Love is not a debt that can be collected at any hour of the night using your fingerprint while you sleep. You are allowed to draw a line. You are allowed to hold it. You are allowed to walk away from people who have demonstrated repeatedly and deliberately that your safety means nothing to them compared to what they want. That is not betrayal. That is survival. And sometimes survival is the most honest thing you can offer the version of yourself that deserved better from the very beginning. I still drive past Rockford sometimes on my way north. I do not stop. I do not slow down. The exit comes and goes, and I watch it pass in the rearview mirror the way you watch something you have finished without anger, without longing, with only the clean and certain knowledge that you are heading in the right direction. The studio is doing well. Not explosively. Steadily. The kind of well that builds on itself without requiring you to look over your shoulder. On my desk, where I can see it every morning when I sit down, there is a small ceramic figure shaped like a baseball. I bought it the week I got the studio keys. It is not the same bank from when I was 8. That one was broken on purpose by hands that should have been protecting it. This one I placed there myself. On purpose. Because I decided that what was shattered once could be rebuilt into something that no one else's hands could reach. If this story stayed with you tonight, I think you already know why. And if no one has told you lately, what was taken from you does not define what you are capable of building. Go build it anyway. Build it carefully. Build it with people who have earned the right to stand beside it. And whatever you do, do not stop. If this story hit you somewhere deep, if you saw yourself in any part of this journey, then you already know this channel is different. We don't just tell stories here. We tell the truth. And the truth has a way of finding the people who need it most. So if you're not subscribed yet, hit that button right now. Come back next time. I have another one waiting for you.